welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. I feel like my camera is just slightly off center. You're going to have to deal with it. We're going to talk a little bit about CPS, Child Protective Services, or DCFS, Department of Child and Family Services, or whatever your state may call it. This is something that came up in a Twitter thread. I was on Twitter today, and there was kind of a lot going on there. And people were asking some a lot of questions, like, how bad is it? Turns out that something like 37% of American children will be investigated by Child Protective Services, whatever your state calls it, at some point. The initial post was talking about how over 50% of black children in the U.S. will experience a child welfare investigation, and nearly double the rate of white children. Of course, this report doesn't have anything to do, doesn't have any metrics for poverty or other family issues, just black, white. They don't even separate out Asian or Latino or something, so whatever. It's just one of those, racism things. But it turns out that yes, one of the people picked up on this. They're like, if 50% is double, how many kids total in the population are being investigated? Turns out that it's over 37%. Now, with some basic napkin math, if you take a look at privileged subgroups, so privileged classes or socioeconomic or political groups, you basically, your Ivy League people, some people in academia, especially education research, educators, in universities, Beltway bandits. You probably are looking, once you get rid of the privileged people who can avoid it, you're probably looking at close to half of all children in the U.S. are investigated at some point. And people live in utter, complete terror of this because regular laws don't apply quite often in these cases. Now, there's a lot of hand-wringing about how we can't take kids away from families that they need to be taken away and all this and various things. And it's not necessarily as bad as it looks. Like, it's not necessarily an instant thing that some random blue-haired chick who may or may not be a chick can just take your kids because they don't like the way you look or the fact that you have a Bible on the shelf if you're a Christian, or pentacle on your wall if you're a pagan. They just don't like you and they can take your kid away. Yes, it can happen in certain circumstances with some agencies. It is absolutely a fear, a based on reality, rational fear for parents to have. But it doesn't generally go that way. So we got swatted once. I've had a couple of interactions with Child Protective Services in some form in 3-4 different states, involving my specific children, only the one. No, two. Sorry, there was two. But involving co-family children. So I had a co-family with an autistic child, and they were just CPS calls fairly regular. There were CPS calls. There were police calls that were not CPS calls because of babysitting another autistic child who was yelling and screaming. And there's been issues, okay? I'm being accurate with everything I say in this video, but I'm not being, I'm kind of obfuscating a little bit to avoid doxing myself or others. So everything I say is true, but I might say a different thing, like yelling versus beating on the wall, or some specific details might change a little bit to protect myself and others. So let's see. One of the responses in the thread immediately is from a kid who was homeschooled in a rural religious environment where the homeschooling group was religiously oriented, and he, says that he wishes CPS had taken more kids away from their neglectful families. And I would like to point out that, it kind of depends on what we're talking about. When you talk about neglect, usually and I'm going to say this because I have experience with homeschooling, I have experience with urban liberal and rural conservative and rural liberal, rural pagan homeschooling environments. So I've got kind of a broad basis of experience. Most of the time when you talk about neglect, what you're talking about is parents who are ignoring kids and they're doing things like doing their own laundry and cooking their own dinner at age 8, which is horrible and awful. And oh my God, no one should ever, ever, ever have to function at that age. Maybe, kind of. Some people like to. I actually was happier doing most of my own cooking at 8 than I was being forced to eat food with a stepfamily at the age 10. So, Anyway, the point is that that level of neglect is far better than what happens if you take the kids from the family. Because foster care is a nightmare. Guaranteed but very few good outcomes from foster care. It's just horrible. Yes, having to do your own laundry and prepare your own food and figure out your own, like, stocking of the fridge and, like, running to the corner store and stuff at age 8 or 9 is horrible, but it's better than being raped every day. And that is a real thing. That is the reality of foster care. For a high percentage of people, it is absolutely a reality. I have in another related people I know closely, where I've had involvement with their family for long term, I know of a child who went into foster care and was trafficked. She was trafficked before the age of 12 in foster care. This is not something that you take lightly. Okay, this whole CPS is bad. And parents are scared to death of this. A lot of people, homeschoolers, are not immune from this. In fact, it's probably worse with homeschoolers as a general rule, because homeschoolers are already kind of on the edges a little bit. We're already in a weird space where even if it's legal, people don't understand it. And if you get a CPS call, you may end up with someone like Clinton. Let's just call her Clinton, okay? I won't tell you her actual, you can guess what her first name was. We got swatted once, okay? Swatting is where someone makes a malicious call to law enforcement attempting to get their doors broken down or the police to shoot them or whatever. Basically, you're calling to try to get a SWAT team to go raid someone's house because you hate them. Swatting it's a big deal. It's something, generally speaking, and I don't want to get too political on this, but it's generally speaking a tactic of extreme progressive and or leftist and or socialist, communist, Bolshevik tankies. It's something that the left does to people they disagree with. Not the broad left, the extreme left, but it is something that happens, and it is usually done against people who are saying things that people think are wrong think, bad think. I was politically active at a period of time, so this was before the 2016 election, and I was politically active, and I said a lot of things, and I was active. I was a voice in a community that no longer exists, and we got swatted. We got anonymous calls complaining about our children being uncared for and dirty and not having showers and stuff. And so this chick comes over, right? And I'm just going to call her a chick because I don't care how politically correct it is. I will tell you what happened. She comes over. And she comes up to the front yard, and the dogs are barking. The kids are, they're like, wait. And apparently she screams at one of the kids that she needs the dad now. And I'm working on a shotgun. I'm literally screwing a barrel on, barrels, double barrel shotgun, into a holder, a frame. And I can't just let it go. So I walk out there, and I've got a shotgun barrel. Oh, wow. Now, we are miles and miles from the nearest city. We are in the country. We are on a farm. And I walk out there, and she's just like, this doesn't look very good. What are you doing with that? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to put it back together after a repair, and I'm not going to leave it on the table unattended Well, my kids are freaking out in the front yard. Who are you and what do you want? She's from a contract agency that works with CPS and blah, blah, blah. And she needs to do some walkthroughs and do an investigation. I'm like, well, that's fucked. What happens if I say no? And she says, well, that's your right. And I can't force my way onto your property, but then I have to call people so that I can force my way onto your property. She threatens me with the cops. You know, let me on, let me do my thing, or the cops will come. No explanations, no nothing. I get no information, okay? So we go through this, and I start grilling her. I'm like, okay, I need to know what's going on. Why are you here? There was a complaint. Where did the complaint come from? We can't divulge that information. I'm like, was the complaint made in person? Was it made on the telephone? You don't have to tell me who it is, but you have to tell me what happened. Blah, blah, blah. It was an email. All right. So, okay. Like swatting had just hit the scene, so I already know what this is, right? Or suspect what this is. And I'm like, all right, you know, confirmation bias, but great. This is, you know, I'm like, okay, so what are the details? She says, I can't give you the details. I have to do the investigation. I'm like, okay. All right, let's have you walk through. Wait here. Let me lock up the shotgun and we'll go through. She doesn't want to wait. She's like, I don't want to. I'm like, look, that's it. You want to walk around? You want to walk around with me having a gun? She's like, no. Oh no. She hates this. She walks through the gate. We have pastured pork, pigs, that we breed and sell, raise. So some of them have pens up front, and they're very friendly. And when you walk up to them, they want treats, okay? That's one best way to herd pigs is with Captain Crunch, treats, okay, cereal. She freaks out. She says, I don't know how you can have kids with pigs. So, you know, I tell her, you know, I'm going to be taking notes here and I'm going to be evaluating your responses because I'm going to be needing to talk to your supervisor. She says, well, I'm a senior case manager. Now, that'll become important in a moment. So we go through this whole process. She walks through. She doesn't like the fences. She doesn't like, she's questioning everything, right? But eventually we walk through. The kids are fine. The kids are like, well, what's your problem, lady? I mean, the kids really are like, what is your problem? You know, they're petting the dogs. They're petting the pigs. They're fine with, you know, the ducks. You know, one of the girls goes out and says, want to see the ducks? And goes and runs off into the orchard, opens the gate, runs off in the orchard with the ducks. Well, Clinton is not having anything to do with it, right? She is not a happy camper, but she eventually leaves. When she leaves, I've got my full set of notes. I've been writing in a notebook. And I've got her card. So I look her up. Turns out that she graduated that spring from a University of California campus. And she was hired as a senior case manager right off the street. She had been on the job for less than a month. I mean, this literally, I mean, she had graduated like 9 weeks before. She'd been on the job less than a month. This was probably her first case. So I take the documentation and say, hey, look, she's hired as a senior. This is where she's from. She's from Northern California. She's a Bay Area yuppie, progressive. She went to UC. This is the problem. She can't handle the fact that we have farm animals on a farm and children. She might be in the wrong profession, in the wrong location, because this is rural Nevada and everything is farms and ranches and dairies. I'm like, you know, so I go through that, writing her supervisor. These are the problems. These are the things she did wrong. This is what I have an issue with. And I'm like, I want to know everything about your complaint, who complained, what's going on, what her chain of command is, who gave her training, because I am going to absolutely sue the ever-living crap out of you people for harassing me. Well, they show up a couple days later, Clinton and her supervisor. And they're like, oh, we forgot to check and see if you have refrigerators. I'm like, we're a farm. You literally leaned against one of the outdoor freezers. Okay. Outdoor meaning shade porch. It's just, there were 3 refrigerators, 2 deep freezers, and a garage fridge with a freezer. At that, I mean, this is a farm thing. You sometimes you have to put a whole cow in the freezer after you cut it up, of course. You know, refrigerators, you use refrigerators for large amounts of stuff. Huge deal, right? Huge thing. So, we forgot to check for refrigerators. I look at the boss, the supervisor, who is like late 20s girl. And I look at her and I said, is this really the excuse you're going to use? And she says, can we just check? I'm like, yeah, let's start with the pigs. I walk them, same path through the pigs. I'm like, this is the same path. Freezer, freezer, fridge, in the house, fridge. Go out the front. I'm like, are we done now? You've seen all of your stuff. I want your reports. I want both your names. And so I go and I send off another email. I spent hours and hours on it. It was long. It was nasty. It was full of legal stuff. I asked lawyer friends about kind of hypothetical details and stuff. And it was full of stuff. It included references to all the mandatory reporters who came by on the weekends for parties. Because, you know, we're dealing with nurses and sheriff's deputies, and like, that's my community, right? I have got a lot of people here. And I get an email back a couple days later from this supervisor saying, we no longer require any contact with you. And I let it go. I let it go. I absolutely, I don't know what happened. I do know that people in the region were having calls and stuff, and I was actually doing barbecues with the sheriff's department, so I'd never heard anything about Clinton ever again. I don't know if she ran back home to South San Francisco, where she grew up, or what. But she was not heard from again. I did get the information that verified that it was a swatting, and I had told them that. I had told them that swatting is actually a thing, and that if they could verify it, I would like to press charges. I got the information that indicated that it was swatting, but not the indication of who was doing the swatting, so that wasn't happening. I suspect that was political. You know, there was no way they were gonna let this become a thing, a fire for their agency. So, that's real. I've had friends who have had CPS, DCFS, whatever, tried to take their kids for meditation retreats, for unorthodox religions, for polyamorous living situations, anything and everything. Yes, I've seen it worse with the Christians. They absolutely hate the traditionalist Christians who do the things like gender roles and hand wash laundry, and I have seen them go after some of the trads that are living. There's some people out in Nevada who are, think of them as old school Mennonites or a new school Amish or something. Close enough, right? There's Cooperites and there's Hebrews and there's like all sorts of stuff. I've seen them go after that, and it is absolutely a problem. And what you get from that government involvement is always bad, horribly bad, daily rape bad. So it's a problem, and if you want to turn people into anti-government anarchists, especially people with families, just keep going down this road, all right? That's it. Stay sideways.